clutches a pair of gloves. As a requisite of Parisian dandies to transfer themselves from chamber to social theoretical in cinematic travels between the mundane and the mythic. Gloves won't count for little. When Orpheus tries to retrieve his lover and when Belle goes back and forth of the castle of the belt, in a split second of Orpheus' transformation inherits the influence mirror from the blood of the poet, and in the latter, the mirror is made invisible, and as Belle put on the magic gloves, the other world simultaneously embraces her body. What also deserves noticing is a burst of a scream, as we can hear in the film, which incarnates into the Orpheus, the vibrating buzz, and in testament of Orpheus, the electric sound. As we can see, Cocteau continues to experiment on the spectrum of transparency of representation based on his contemplation on the relationship between real and unreal. His early films reveals of our expectation for a sign of metamorphosis, while in the more theatrical, secular, but no less mythic, the imperceptibility of the transmutation which pushes a threshold, real and unreal in suspension, haunts more horribly. In the case of Beauty and the Beast, as Belle wears a magic glove, the other world is simultaneously bracing her with a scream at the first transmutation, but without a mirror. In the Testament of Orpheus, the wandering of Cocteau and his adopted song through wild stage, theater, and highway exemplify representing the unreal in real surroundings. The once shocking but now a little bit verbose superimposition and reverse playback, however, leaves the question at how artistically represent the Kafkaesque experiences to remain a challenge. Entering the transcendental world and becoming others, the mechanics of dreams and sleepwalk are introduced by and experienced through the cinematic technologies, shedding light on the existence of dysfunction of time and body. The category consists of the poet moving still in the darkness and dragging all his uncontrolled legs along the people corridor. The fantastic intermediate montage of Orpheus and her herpes and their subversive fight against the loss of gravity, a slow motion and the slippage of Belle, and the more subtle slow motion of the roaming Cocteau. The experience to activate them display the total and the obscure style with time upset, space purified, where the facility of language and communication is of no avail. Disorder of the body movement of the poets makes them look like patients of neurosis or shell shock who are in desperate need of strong treatment. The documentary by Seal Haynes from 1917 and 1917 to 1918 in Natalie Hospital records the life and cure of shell shock sufferers whose incompetent body is considered detrimental to the glory of national imagination or for masculinity. In both cases of shell shock sufferer and dreamer, the corporality deprived of effective control compels the patient to keep searching for supporters, for instance, the walls, along which are the sleepwalking characters in the film by Cocteau, who used to be an opium addict and saw the bloody of the poets in the Great War. Standing in this point, we can see how Cocteau responds to, no matter whether conscious or not, the personal and the historical traumas, even though the representation making which visual and audible difference, they emerge and re-emerge from time to time. Just as shell shock and stupid walk are subject to the medical rectification, the awry body movements and the time experiences experienced in them form a great medical history sheet of the antithesis to everyday routine of perception. To extend one consensus of many artists on the role of art to make invisible visible, the manipulation of the time, space, and movement by Cocteau makes the imperceptible perceptible. That is to say, the body without organ in Deleuzian word, which we can never encounter with magic gloves and white towers, other than in the units and the dreams. Through the mirror and double mask of revealing the truth made into a masterpiece by Oscar Wilde, and inherited by Cocteau, the normal posits and reposits in the shadows of the abnormal. The travel of the Hell Trial sets a living performance of Heartbeat standing still in front of a fan against the screen, showing Orpheus coming close to the fall. When screamed in theater from the Orpheus who is dying, scream to the Heartbeat who is dead, scream, and to the audience who are living. Of course, a three-layered reality is structured where each one seems more real than the latter, but in only one side do they exist. Another example in the Museum of Arts, there is a portrait of some doctor on the cabin standing, the gentleman in front of a heap of paintings, say the tradition of frame within frame. And if we look at the episode in this way, screen within screen, it's not an invention, but a revival of the representation of mounting realities already in the spaces of gallery and theater, where the boundaries between corporal and projective, between real and visual, is blurred. We have gloves, but not a bit like the ones in the films. The registering of the interfaces indicates paradoxically the impossibilities of the total blending of medialities in constant debates and dialogues. In this part, I would like to retreat from the fantasy to art practice and take a close look at the importance Cocteau lays on the collaboration in art. When one media, which technologically and aesthetically extend the body of themselves, how can we imagine intermediality? The first step of Cocteau in film is the blood of a poet, financially and of course spiritually supported by aristocrat Vigon de Noyer, thus can be regarded as carrying forward the institutional patronage of fine art, especially during the period of historical avant-garde, when the artists had been exploring diverse modes of filmmaking with the failure of their manifestos to rival the beliefs of studio groups in film as a product of the age of mechanical reproduction and cancel both the mass entertainment and national interests. Cocteau embodies ambiguous reverie by asserting himself and his colleagues as craftsmen, not filmmaker. The frequent reference to processing the manual operation, the very most sensitive terminal of nerves, where the repulsion and the compulsion expressed in words, on one hand, anchors with the concept of body as instrument, reflected by Maclo-Bondi, that to put it simply, artist is artist only when he is making art. And on the other, the retrospective fashion of understanding media, that is to say, the newness of new media stems from the extension of existing mediality and perceptive ratios of traditional media. By exploring moving statues, Cocteau once again connects new media with traditional arts rather than discarding the connections. Much in the same way he calls his stage work the Eiffel Tower Wedding Party, the plastic expression of poetry. As endorsing the craftsmanship, Cocteau humbly requests for understanding from audience and the critics for the hard work his team suffering from and the concrete obstacles to experiment with to find a way out. The hands in the famous photographic collage belong to Cocteau in view of his fertile creativity, and at the same time are not his. Without the artists as well as technicians who retain naive love and trust in film, as Cocteau repeats, he can't accomplish what he expects. Here, the bodily metaphor of polycharia represents an ensemble cooperating for the one and the same goal. In the experiences of living and working in community with others from all fields of art, for instance, music band Les Six in his early career, and of course his auteur series with chaotic and degraded version in galleries, salons, and bookstores. Cocteau sees the fraternity and recognize a family there. On account of his nature, Cocteau didn't perform as stern father like Brecht. Outside the crew, Cocteau also gets well along with some of his contemporaries, in spite of storming landscape of the school wrangle. The workshop environment in the case of Cocteau makes possible for what I would like to apply the word democratic space of art, even though at a small scale constituting our reflection and a lab for the harmony of the societies as a whole. The fact that we should face up to, however, is that the family model is just a representative in the compression and hostility in the relationship of Cocteau with Diaghilev, Picasso, and Prédon confirms how difficult to sustain friendship in the art circles, even one simple project. Where grasping legitimacy sometimes surpasses the mission of making art. Okay, in accordance to the imagination art workshop as home environment, Cocteau assigns to film another function, say commemorating the surface of morality. For instance, the eyes and the beauty of Jean Marais and François Barrière, which Cocteau considers projecting from deep within and worth inscribing. This point of view provides an inspiring explanation for why the film orders, among other features, are characteristic of the consistency of employment of performers, which helps to documenting some kind of family album, the physiognomy of beautiful mind, and as well as their performances contributing to a valuable archive for book teaching and training. So that's the story of the artists. And when it comes to the audience and the spectatorship, Cocteau appears optimistic in the potential of cinema to enhance a cultural democracy, yet express modest sorrows for that most audience and critics feel at a loss, except some young people who have a taste for his films. It is obvious that Beauty and the Beast, the eagle has two hands, and the storm within are more comprehensible due to the visibility of narrative to most of the audience than the trilogy of the poet. The audience tends to immerse when watching the former, but will be constantly disturbed by the later, especially the Blood of Poet and the Testament of the Poet. Betraying the idea of Cocteau that film allows people to dream together, His thematic poems, which show themselves on different levels of transparency and comprehensibility, can only have a limited effect without connecting to other social, cultural contexts and subtexts. So they reveal dream representative, but not the dream representative. By exhorting cinematography to replace the cinema, which in the shared discourse of film industry means filmmaking for economic success and public amusement, cinematography, as Cocteau points, requires experiments starting from causing mystics and later control it to rival the dogmas in spite of which feels farther you are from. To achieve the poetry of cinema, to me, it means everyday legend. And make art accessible and the audience acculturate as much as possible. Although the action, usually disturbs, it promises to keep reactivating the film history and its spectatorship. Every time the characters in the films do not show envy of asking questions, their companion will rebuke them to stop pumping and shut. In a slight and tender way, Cocteau reminds us of how he distances himself from interpretation, even though believing in the artist might have in mind what the audiovisual means, and he recounts in the interviews and dare to show publicly the set and the technology, that is to say the secret that naturalists endeavor to avoid. However, it deserves for audience practicing on the basis of reliance on their own thinking instead of being ready for some preoccupied answers. To make embarrasses the poetry which Orpheus puts his name aside, but actually plagiarized from video information, Cocteau casts a critical voice back upon the invisible institutional power traversing the overlapping of creativity and obedience. Undeniably, Cocteau sometimes inserts strict comments and definitions, which but does not necessarily lead to exclusive conclusions, closing the possibilities of participatory reading, which happens not only in the viewing of highly experimental, but also when at some certain points the easily accessible narrative condensed to invoke the real and to inscribe it as a legend and blossom to shock. It is like a moment avant-garde sneaking to the ganzen Kunstwerk, the German word for total work of art. In the case of works of Cocteau, slow motion of Belle after her intruding the castle, and the happy reunion for the keyhole by the mom in the storm within, same as when we check the Bond and Crazy sketches of Dali, of course in the Museum of Art in Cluj, we will discover what turned out to be the iconic images of his most celebrated works. For instance, the eyelashed skin of her face and this embodied lips. So what I mean by installation is not just a tragedy of spectatorship beyond, of course, it's beyond the teaching technology of viewing. Although I think the creatively applied devices can arouse an insightful study of film, advancing the moving image to the media archive and media archaeology. As to the blood of the poet and to the testament of Orpheus, the audience don't have to follow the plot. Follow the plots if there is one clear in sequence. We can pick up from anywhere to get into the film. Does the love affair with Beast of Belle mix up her fantasy? Please note the curtains in different two different points in the film, and her hate love for the childhood sweet. It's a strange dog in the garden, humorous homage to Angshan Dalu by Cocteau's surrealist friend. It's a half-man sculpture referring to among the tales of man turning into stone, the fair of Pygmalion, and the Aias Venus. So the experience of watching Cocteau doesn't limit it to, but as well depends on how you know about the personal history of artists. Of course, art history, psychoanalysis, or other branches of human knowledge. Okay, I'm the only one, so we could come into the next part of question. Yes, yes, my presentation is okay. So I have to read fast due to the time limit, but the time is there's no time limit, so yeah. I hope I express myself evenly. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we invite you for comments or questions on Cocteau.
Do we have any avant-gardists in our session?
I just have a question. Do you only specialize in Cocteau or are also other cineasts in his area?
I'm now taking out a dissertation on the how to say the experimentality of films. By experimentality, I mean it's experimental at certain historical ages. For instance, television was avant-garde, but it has become a dogma in the 1950s and 70s. So I think digital art is also now avant-garde, but it will become dogma in the future. So it's very interesting. I focus my research on two say classical modes of avant-garde. One is from French avant-garde, the two parts, collage, avant and garde together, and the other one from Germany, against a Kunstwerk, so long a name to represent the conception of German art, which always put things and to put different kinds of art together into an integrated whole and let the people get immersed into it. So I think some of Cocteau's films show the some characteristics of avant-garde, say shock the people, make the audience disturbed. But on the other hand, he also makes some films like La Belle et la Bête or the Le Baron Terrible. That is to say, it's a story. They can make people and audience to immerse into that, but not very much disturbing. So I put Zhang Cocteau into my study from the historical avant-garde, that is to say the 1930s and 1940s, and till now. Of course, what I want to add is that Cocteau is a mentor, a teacher for the new wave of French. So I think he's a key person in the history of French film and also the history of avant-garde film, avant-garde arts. That's my answer. I hope it will be okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Did you have or no? I thought you had a question. No. So yeah, what I wanted exactly to ask you, how much you consider him as a Cocteau being part of the underground experimental film, or you would consider him much more a cinematic artist?
That is hard. Thank you for the question. That is hard to categorize a filmmaker into right now he's avant-gardist or he's some say studio filmmaker, because as I know in the early careers of many of the artists filmmakers, they put themselves into the experimental and make something really shocking. But in their later career, they will weave the experimental elements into their say mainstream films shown in the studios. So even though people won't realize that some points in the films, some points of the big films, made in studio, there is something experimental. But I think the artists have the avant-garde conceptions into some new forms, which suits the mainstream film, which focus on the money making or mass entertainment. So they just mix up both the avant-garde and the studio films. That's why Zhang Cocteau encouraged young people to start from not film school. He said there's no need for film school. Just let them join some workshops and join some teamwork who are making films and learn how to experiment dogmas and start from a 0 point and develop the disturbing elements into their future works. Thank you. That's my answer to this question.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
In this genealogy, I would like to know if you consider also the writers that filmed. I'm remembering the writers, the European writers of the 50s, for example, Alain Robbe-Grillet, Marguerite Duras, Pier Paolo Pasolini, Peter Weiss. These writers of after the wars, after war moment, and they also did something that the literature career has the same value as the cinematographic career, and I think Zhang Cocteau also leads with this kind of camera stylo before this concept, as you highlight. I'd like to know, the question is if you consider also in the literature, in this kind of big scope, don't know if it's...
That is very insightful question. And of course, when we consider the avant-garde, we of course must have the relationship between the film and the literature into consideration, because some people want to experiment with how they can make a film with the same story they have written for a book, they have written for a novel. So they are extremely different media, and it is very interesting in the history of avant-garde that the first influential part is historical avant-garde. That means before the Second World War, which starts from the First World War. And the second one, right, the greatly influential ages is new realist. As you mentioned, the Italian great writers, and also and the next part is the French New Wave, and the next part is what we are experiencing now is the digitalization. So as to the literature tradition of the neo-realist. I think both of the French artists, including Zhang Cocteau and the Italian neo-realists, they kept contemplating what is real and what is realism. So when talking about the socialist realism, I don't think it's actually that is the real world. That is reality. That is the truth. Because when we look back, the socialist realism greatly represents some utopian version of the world and human. I mean, the avant-garde film groups also asserts certain versions of human, and Newman in Germany, experimental circles, and the how to build a new world on the basis of their manifestos. So I think according to the literature, they try to, after the shocking effect, after the historical avant-garde, say the expressionist, the Cubism, the Dadaism, they are far from the masses. They are far from ordinary people. So I think the ones who starts with writing literature maybe tried to build new connections with the ordinary man, and as well as their filmmaking, the neo-realist Italian ones, they try to tell a simple story, just what we can experience every day. That's far from what Zhang Cocteau has tried to express. A more elitist. So I think not only in Italy, also in Asia countries, some filmmakers in say 1980s and 1990s, they also start from writing novels, writing poems, and trying to make. And in later, maybe 10 years later, they try to make the film, make the book, make the novel into films with a different set of media. So that's part of my answer, because I think I cannot come up with a best answer until the next morning when I brush my teeth. so let's discuss in the later. Thank you.
I have another question for you. When I read the title of your paper, I read moving image / installation, and I haven't understood the part of the installation.
Thank you for the question. Installation is such a brand new concept for us. Also we are not using the word postmodernism. We are replacing the word into contemporary artists. They are trying to say fight against the historical avant-garde, or the avant-garde after the immigrating to America. So avant-garde is always experimenting with new possibilities. So installation, in the easiest way to explain, it's like it may comes from the situationism, and of course it's a long story. Of course the concept of art as a happening, as an event, or as a body performance. So Let's come to the question why I write something about the installation in this paper of Zhang Cocteau, who is, of course, to the contemporary artists, is auto-fashioned one, because I see in his films, to some extent, the endeavors to make a new environment for the audience, and by using the intermediate technology, he indeed makes some fantastic multi-layered spaces. So by using the word installation, I'm not saying that installation art has already started from Zhang Cocteau and even to the much earlier period of avant-garde. By using this word, I mean we always can see some new trees in new waves in art. Sorry, is that nice? So I mean, we can see some elements in our nowadays experienced contemporary art. Some elements can be traced back to the historical avant-garde. So maybe the word installation means something like unconsciously, Zhang Cocteau has begun to arouse the audience participation in his interviews with his friends and his own writings, and it's just want to build spaces, the theatrical, the cinematic spaces to get to intercommunicate with the audience. What we are playing with today, I think, has been played already by our ancestors. So that's also why the reason why I came to the film history, early film history, rather than studying a very new one. So that's my answer. It's my fragmented.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, if not, we would like to thank your
Thank you.
your talk and the debate.